mean, we didn't beat them until the last 4 minutes of the game, I think. It was like 6-6. We were climbing up on, but I guess the backbreaker was they took 2 or 3 shots before, I don't forget what it was, quite a few at me, and they were taking the rebounds off. And I said, where the hell is Riggs, you know? And he's over there to the side, you know, he's got his stick, and the ball hit in front of the crease, and I hit the ball to the side of my stick, I went right into his stick. Right into his stick, and then I saw Riggs go down. He's cradled like this. He's running down the field like a rooster. I fell down. I went right down like this, you know. And all I could see was that mud flying off his cleats, and he took that ball down like that. I think it was 2 passes. It was 7-6. Then we scored another one for good luck, and we beat him by 2 goals that day. And that was a game that I remember, but I think the thing that I remember most was Coach Blake. You know, at the end of the game, his face was the color of a shirt right here. I never saw a color on a man's face like that. And I went up, shake his hands, and nice game, coach. I'm smiling. He's not, you know. Army coach. And a couple weeks later, he died. And I think tough game to lose.
Now, the interesting thing about this is I had the privilege of playing with Oren. We were freshmen together. And Jim and I played at the other end of the field. I tried my hardest, really. And years went on, and Oren graduated and was an artist in New York. Jim and I went on to the West Coast to play in the NFL, down to Dallas. And they left me behind. So I became a lacrosse coach. I didn't really want a job. I went through trials and tribulations, as all coaches do. Good years and bad years, good games and bad games. Good experiences and bad experiences. And the story stretched. I stayed in the game a long time. I stayed in the game over 40 years. And I heard a lot of stories. And I used to hear stories about people who witnessed the Army game that Arnold was in, and Jim was in, and great Jim Brown was in. And people would pontificate about these guys, these great athletes, and all the heroics of Jim Brown, and they never mentioned my name. And I said to a guy one day, you were fortunate enough to watch Ridlon and Lyons and Brown. It must have been a great experience for you. He said, you won't believe it, Roy, how great it was. I said, do you remember me? I said, why should we? I was on that same team. My mother had my clippings on the refrigerator back home. I could have talked to my mother, and she would have told them how good I was. Stories stretch, but this story is real. In 1950, with the game of lacrosse, the national game of Canada, white man playing it, trying to play it like the natives, but not quite as well. The natives kind of retreated to the box game, not so much the field game. And the field game was what we played in the United States. We played it thanks to a lot of Canadians that came over the border to the United States, and they coached and played on club teams all up and down the East Coast, Long Island, Boston, Syracuse, Canadian players. They knew the game, they taught us the game. And the game developed, and I went down south, and it was a gentleman's game, a Victorian type of game. And the Ivy League schools picked it up at the turn of the century: Yale, Dartmouth, Columbia, Princeton, I should say, Cornell. They all had lacrosse, and then as a result, all the fine boys' schools, they all wanted to go to the Ivy League school. They all played it. So by the 1910, all the New England prep schools and down Long Island and down around Baltimore, the private schools, they all wanted to play. Hopkins was one of the first teams to pick the game up from the Canadians. And it grew and grew, and there was a problem. There wasn't enough sticks. They weren't attainable. So we had a terrible fire up in the Cornwall Reservation in 1956. The factory that made the essence, the heart of this game, burned. And it looked like this game was going to die with it, because the craftsmen were not motivated, and they were not into entrepreneurs. They loved to hunt and fish, occasionally have a beer. They just were not interested in rebuilding and being able to bring the number of sticks up to what the market demanded. So a couple of very clever entrepreneurs picked up my idea that I had because I was a sculpture major. It died. I was like the guy that invented 7-Up, or I invented 6-Up, I didn't invent 7-Up. I went to DuPont when I was in school with a fiberglass stick that I made in my father's basement. And I asked them if it was possible. And there was some engineer down there who said, forget it. It'd be too costly, and you'd only sell one stick to somebody that would never break, and you'd never have another sale. And the game's too small. So I quit. About 4 years later, there were two gentlemen with deep pockets in Baltimore. And they went down to DuPont and said, what can you do? This sport's going to die if we can't help it. And that's when the plastic or urethane stick was invented. It comes out of a mold. It's almost indestructible. If it does have a problem, you pick up another one that came out of the same mold. So it wasn't your girlfriend broke her leg, type of thing, you know. It was replacing. And then from that, competition got keen in the United States, not Canada, in the United States, between an outfit called Bryan in Boston, who wanted to capture the sports market, and an outfit in Baltimore called STS, and they wanted to capture the lacrosse market. And they got very competitive, and they created better sticks and better handles and better stringing, and went back and forth, and the game gained by their competitiveness. And when I took over as head coach at Syracuse in 1970, when I blew my first whistle and the team came out, half of them had a wooden stick from Canada, the Cornwall Reservation. Half of them had a plastic stick. And who was going to win out? Well, the plastic sticks would break and they were subject to weather. And in 1971, 3/4 of the kids had plastic sticks, and a few holdouts had wooden sticks. And by 1974 and 75, you couldn't find a wooden stick anywhere. Number one, they weren't being made in great numbers. There were pockets of makers like in Buffalo and a few makers in Canada. The Jacques family out on the reservation made a handful of beautiful handcrafted wooden sticks. But why buy something so fragile and so ephemeral as a beautiful hickory stick when you could pick up a plastic stick and aluminum handle? Then, as the generation went on, the plastics got better and the kids got smart, and they started to tie-dye them with their school, with their name, with their logo. And the stringing, we gave up on the gut, which was subject to dogs chewing on it or whatever. And we used nylon. We eliminated the animal factor in the stick that was so important back then. Now it's all synthetic. The handle doesn't have to be wood. It could be this. This handle is a 21st century invention. It's Kevlar and titanium. Kevlar is what protects our police force, bulletproofing. And titanium is what we send to the moon. The handles are a combination of Kevlar and titanium, very light. The stick is done with urethane. You can dye the stick, as most kids do. It's fascinating to dye your stick, your school card. And then you can string it with any number of different kinds of synthetic. It could be shoelaces, it could be nylon. Today you can even buy a bamboo handle because it has some flexibility to it. To think that we went from George Beers, 1820, and George Catlin, the artist, with a wooden stick, and the meaning behind it, and the love behind it, and the talent behind it to make it. So today, you can buy a plastic stick, a metal handle, anywhere in the United States, all 50 states, and as a result, the game has grown by leaps and bounds.